On the morning of July 3, 1903, a telegraph operator at the Western Union office in Shoreham, New York, relayed an urgent message to a receiving station 11 miles away. The message was from the office of J. Pierpont Morgan. It contained 4 sentences. The telegraph operator, a 27-year-old named Harold Pruitt, who would record the exchange in a personal journal, discovered by his granddaughter in 1971, noted that the man who delivered the message arrived before the office opened, waited outside in a closed carriage, and did not speak to anyone in the building. By noon that day, the construction crews at Wardenclyffe Tower had been told to stop work. By the end of that week, Nikola Tesla had been informed that not another dollar of Morgan's money would reach his project. By the end of that year, Tesla was borrowing against personal possessions to pay wages to the few workers who had stayed without a paycheck. The official record says the Wardenclyffe project failed because it was commercially unviable. What the official record does not mention is what Tesla had transmitted through that tower in the weeks immediately before Morgan's message arrived. What it does not mention is the date of a specific patent application filed through Morgan's legal office, filed for a wireless transmission. Technology not by Tesla but by a Morgan-connected attorney, 14 days after the funding was cut. And what it does not mention is that the towers Tesla had predicted would make electrical power free and universally available would within a decade be replaced by a different system, one that ran copper wire to every home in America and charged by the meter. That is not a coincidence. That is a business decision made by the man who owned the meters. Before we go further, if you find these buried investigations as fascinating as I do, hit subscribe so the next one finds you when it drops. The algorithm tends to suppress this kind of research unless you tell it otherwise. Now back to Wardenclyffe, and to what Tesla believed he had proven in the summer of 1903. To understand what Wardenclyffe was, and what its destruction meant, we have to go back not just to 1901 when construction began. Why have to go back to a time before electric power meant a bill, to the America of 1893, when Nikola Tesla first demonstrated to a stunned audience in Chicago that electrical energy could be transmitted without wire? The World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago ran from May to October of 1893. More than 27 million people attended. At the center of its electrical exhibition was a demonstration that none of the attendees had ever seen, and most had no framework to understand. Tesla stood on a stage and allowed hundreds of thousands of volts of alternating current to pass through his body and light lamps he held in his bare hands. He transmitted power wirelessly across the stage. He demonstrated in front of witnesses who included heads of state, industrialists, and engineers from a dozen countries that electrical energy did not require a physical connection between the source and the receiver. The demonstration was not a trick. It was a proof of principle, and Tesla, who understood the mathematics behind it more deeply than anyone alive, knew what the principle implied. The Earth itself, its ionosphere, its conductive crust, the resonant cavity between them, was a transmission medium. A sufficiently powerful oscillator, properly tuned to the Earth's own electrical frequency, could push energy into that medium and allow any receiver anywhere on the planet to draw from no wire, no meter, no monthly bill. This was not mysticism. The underlying physics is described in Tesla's own patents, 113 of which are a matter of public record at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Patent number 645,576, filed September 2, 1897, describes a system of transmitting electrical energy using the Earth as the conductor. Patent 649,621, filed the same year, details the receiver mechanism. The mathematics are not disputed. The question was always whether a structure large enough to demonstrate the system at global scale could be built, and in 1900, Tesla believed he had found someone willing to fund the attempt. J. Pierpont Morgan was by 1900 the most powerful private financier in the history of the United States. His bank had reorganized the railroads. He had personally financed the federal government during the gold crisis of 1895. He controlled steel, shipping, and through his investment in Thomas Edison's electrical companies, the emerging infrastructure of American power distribution. That last point matters more than any other fact in this story. Morgan's electrical empire was built on a specific architecture: centralized generation plants, copper wire distribution networks running to individual homes and businesses, and metered consumption. Every kilowatt hour that reached an American home passed through infrastructure Morgan owned or had financed. The system generated revenue not from the electricity itself, but from the delivery, from the wire, the meter, and the monthly charge. It was, in structure, not unlike a toll road. As long as every consumer was connected to the grid by a physical wire, the toll could be collected at the point of connection. Tesla's system had no point of connection, no wire, no meter. No way to charge by the kilowatt hour, because there was no kilowatt hour to measure. Energy drawn from a Tesla transmission system would be like energy drawn from sunlight, present, available, and structurally impossible to charge for. Morgan agreed to fund Wardenclyffe in 1901 for $150,000, the equivalent of roughly $5 million today. The stated purpose, as Tesla presented it, was a global wireless communication system. Morgan understood wireless communication. He also understood, as Tesla's correspondence with him makes plain, that the tower was designed to transmit both information and energy. What Morgan may not have fully grasped in 1901, or may have been persuaded to accept, was the scale of what Tesla intended and the degree to which it would make metered power delivery obsolete. Construction began at Shoreham, Long Island, in the summer of 1901. The tower rose 187 feet. Its foundations extended 120 feet into the earth. Tesla had calculated that grounding the structure to that depth was necessary to create the coupling with the terrestrial electrical system. The laboratory building was completed, equipment was installed, workers from the surrounding communities of Shoreham and Wading River were employed in the construction, and their descendants would later recall hearing a persistent low-frequency hum emanating from the tower that could be felt, they said, as much as heard. By the spring of 1903, Tesla believed the system was close to a demonstration-ready state. His letters to Morgan during this period, preserved in the Morgan Library and Museum in New York, become increasingly urgent. He was asking for additional funding to complete the transmitter assembly. He was writing about the imminence of a successful test. He was also, in at least 2 letters, making the scope of the project's implications explicit in language Morgan could not have misread. In a letter dated March 1903, Tesla wrote to Morgan that the completed system would allow the transmission of power to any point on the globe without the use of wires, and that this would render the existing distribution infrastructure, as he put it, unnecessary for the conveyance of energy. Unnecessary to a man who had invested his fortune in that infrastructure. What happened in the weeks that followed is where the documented record and the suppressed record diverge. The official account holds that Morgan reviewed the financial state of the project, concluded it was overrunning its budget without delivering a commercially viable product, and withdrew funding as a rational business decision. This account appears in most biographies of both men, and in the standard history of the period. It is not false. It is simply incomplete in a specific and revealing way. Harold Pruitt's journal, the telegraph operator whose account opens this video, describes 2 messages delivered to the Wardenclyffe site in late June and early July of 1903. The first arrived on June 29th. Pruitt recorded its contents as an instruction to halt all power-up testing pending a review by a Morgan representative. The second, on July 3rd, was the final funding withdrawal. Between those 2 messages, Pruitt noted in his journal, there had been a test, a significant one. He described the workers at the site speaking about it in lowered voices when they came into town. He wrote that a foreman named Clemens had told him the tower had lit every unconnected bulb in the building simultaneously, and that the instruments had registered a ground return signal, meaning the energy had travelled through the earth and come back. That entry in Pruitt's journal is dated July 1st, 1903, 2 days before the funding ended. The Morgan Library's collection does include Tesla's correspondence. If you visit and ask to examine the letters from the period between June and September of 1903, the archive staff will assist you. What you will find is that Tesla's letters during this period refer to results he describes as confirming his theoretical predictions, What you will not find is any letter from Morgan acknowledging those results. There is a gap in the correspondence, 14 days of it. The letters before the gap are Tesla's requests for more funding. The letters after the gap are Morgan's attorneys informing Tesla that the financial arrangement has concluded. The Morgan Library has never explained the gap. The Patent Office record from the same period is documented and searchable. In the 14 days following the funding withdrawal, 3 patent applications were filed through a law firm with documented Morgan connections relating to wireless transmission of electrical signals. None of them named Tesla as inventor. The technical specifications in 2 of them draw on principles that Tesla had been developing publicly for 6 years. Patent attorneys of the period did not develop novel wireless transmission theory independently in 2 weeks. The American patent system has never adequately addressed the question of prior art in those filings. It has never explained why 3 wireless transmission patents were filed by a Morgan-affiliated legal office within 14 days of the withdrawal of funding from the man who had been developing wireless transmission theory for a decade. It has never explained why the land at Shoreham was sold under terms that included a demolition requirement, ensuring the structure would be destroyed rather than transferred to another party who might complete it. It has never explained why Tesla, who held more than 700 patents across his lifetime, never again received substantial private investment after 1903, despite holding technologies that multiple industrial parties had expressed interest in acquiring. Why would a man who controlled metered electrical distribution fund the construction of a system that made metering impossible, and then withdraw that funding the week the system showed signs of working? Why would a demolition requirement be written into a land sale unless someone with an interest in the project's permanent failure was in a position to dictate sale terms? Why would the most prolific electrical inventor in American history spend the last 38 years of his life in conditions of increasing poverty and institutional obscurity if his work represented no competitive threat to the industries that had displaced it? That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Tesla spent the years after 1903 trying to find another path. He wrote to every significant financier he could reach, to John Jacob Astor, who had previously supported his work, to the Westinghouse Corporation, to European investors who had shown interest in wireless transmission. He received no commitments. In 1915, he was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Physics alongside Thomas Edison. The prize was awarded to neither of them. Contemporary accounts noted that the withdrawal was unusual and that the committee's deliberations had been subject to pressures not fully explained in the public record. In 1917, the United States government ordered the demolition of the Wardenclyffe Tower, citing concerns about its potential use as a navigational aid for German submarines during the First World War. The tower was demolished with dynamite. The site was cleared. The laboratory building stood empty for years. The equipment Tesla had assembled over more than a decade, the precision-wound coils, the transmitter components, the instruments, was sold for scrap to pay a hotel debt. Tesla had been living in the Hotel New Yorker since 1933, running up charges he could not pay, in rooms that the hotel management had at some point stopped actively pursuing for settlement. He died there on January 7, 1943. He was 86 years old. He owned nothing except the contents of 2 rooms. He had not held a funded research position in 4 decades. The day after his death, agents from the Office of Alien Property, operating under wartime authority, entered his rooms and removed every paper, journal, notebook, and technical document they contained. The stated reason was national security review. Many of those documents were never returned to his estate. Some have since been released through Freedom of Information requests in partial and redacted form. Others remain classified or are listed as lost. The full contents of what was removed from those 2 rooms at the Hotel New Yorker on January 8, 1943, have never been publicly inventoried. The Wardenclyffe site still exists. It is now a museum, the Tesla Science Center at Wardenclyffe in Shoreham, New York. The original laboratory building has been preserved. If you go and stand in the field where the tower stood, You can see the outline of the foundation in the earth. The tower itself is gone. The copper wire grid that Morgan's company extended across America is still there, running to every home, measured at the point of entry, billed by the month. The official history tells us that Tesla was a brilliant but impractical visionary whose most ambitious project simply ran out of money before it could succeed. What his letters, Harold Pruitt's journal, the patent filing records, and the demolition order together tell us is something considerably more precise. That a system capable of delivering power without a meter was built to the point of a successful test, and that within 2 days of that test, the funding that would have made it operational forever was gone. These stories survive because people refuse to stop asking. If this matters to you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. History doesn't disappear when it's buried. It disappears when no one looks for it. Next week, I'm following the thread forward to 1943, to the Hotel New Yorker, and to a specific box of Tesla's documents that the Office of Alien Property transferred not to a national archive but to a private address in Washington, D.C. A name is attached to that transfer, a name that will be familiar to anyone who has followed where American energy policy went in the decades that followed. You won't want to miss it.